LiveWork design director. Sorry, jumped the gun there. Welcome to this very exciting webinar. I'm purely your host today. So let me give a little bit of introduction before we get into the meat of things. So also welcome from LiveWork. If you don't know us, we have strange shaped bodies. More seriously, we're here as an organization to be of service to people, society, and I guess specifically organizations who are navigating complex challenges. And there's nothing more complex than our ecological situation. So we have a phrase that we've used for a long time about, we help to think about how we change the way we live and we work, and that becomes particularly pertinent in our current situation. But what we'd like to do today is think of this, introduce you to some thoughts about how we go about redesigning the future. And as I mentioned, specifically organizations, it's the organizations, both public and private, that are on a transition or a transformation journey, responding to our growing awareness of planetary crises or planetary change. We have seen over time how this has initially been seen as a kind of a scientific challenge or an economic challenge, but more and more we understand it's a human challenge. It involves all of us. It involves changing the way we live and we work. So that's where we start as designers, understanding people and thinking about how we meet our needs in new ways. So how do we do that? What we're going to do today is deep dive into a particular tool and methodology that is in a way a cornerstone of service design, which is a service blueprint. It's something that was invented by a woman called Lynn Shostak in the 70s, but we adopted very early on and have been working with and evolving and well recognized within the trade. And the service blueprint generally talks about a customer or a citizen or a service user of some kind and the journey they go on as they experience and use a service. And then using that lens, that external kind of user, customer, beneficiary lens, to guide how the operations of an organization come together to meet those needs and to deliver that service, and to think about how that relates to the business value, the outcomes that the organization is trying to achieve, and align across these three lenses, if you will. And it's been a discussion for a while at LiveWork and elsewhere as to how do we include the planet in that blueprint? How do we think about nature as a stakeholder, or different metaphors like that? So that will be the focus of today. To take you through it, you have Anna from LiveWork, who's been with us for many years and has been leading our sustainability efforts and projects. And we have Miranda, who's a designer from IKEA and Inca Design. If you don't understand the makeup of IKEA's corporate structure, neither do I, don't worry. So she's going to talk through, how they've applied it in their setting. Miranda's been deeply involved in a lot of the leading work that IKEA have done in terms of bringing circularity and other ecological considerations into their products and services, specifically services. If you've ever seen the circular parts of the store that are starting to pop up, she's been deeply involved in that. So Anna's going to talk a little bit about our journey as LiveWork and talk about some of the challenges and the evolution of thinking around how you might include planet in a service blueprint. And as I said, Miranda will talk about specific achievements and progress made at IKEA. So just before we start, we'd like to ask who on the call, who on the webinar has already tried to incorporate sustainability in their work, just to kind of wake you up and get you involved. So if you have, wave at the camera or put a smiley face in the chat. Thank you very much. And just to move on from that specifically, we have a question for you. So what drives your desire for transformation? What's the motivation that's behind this? We find that when we get into this, we're touching on some very kind of deep feelings. So tap into that and give us a little sense of that in the chat, and have a little look at what everybody else is saying. I'll just give you all a minute to do so. Thank you, Meta. Okay, wonderful. That was brief, but and an unusual text-based way to connect. But I hope there's some feeling of community going on there, that you're in a room with people who have a similar concerns and aspirations. Okay, so just before I hand over and we make a proper start, what we've found works really well with these sessions is if you pop questions in as they occur to you during the presentation, and then my job at the end will be to I'm privileged to pick out the ones that I can that look like worth discussing and picking up at the end. So I'm not sure we'll be able to get to everything, but pop them in. We'll do our best. Please, if you're addressing them at Anna or for Miranda, pop their name in there as well. And just a little request for you all, particularly if you're asking questions, but just generally, it's nice to see some faces in there, and that would be nice. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Anna. She's going to talk you through the route towards sustainability in the blueprint. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, so I guess a lot of us have been wondering, service design and the planet, how might that work? And probably like us, you've been through multiple iterations and thinking, and we thought, you know what, let's share a little bit of ours, and hopefully that will help you along, or the other way around when we can cross-pollinate a little bit. And yeah, how do you start thinking about that? Well, in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of companies pledging to do their part in this bigger effort for us collectively to get to a more sustainable future. We've seen companies say, by 2030, we're net zero. We've seen companies say, we're going to source more locally. Some have prototyped with more sustainable materials. So we've seen a lot going on, especially if you're looking for it. But at the same time, we also know that a lot of companies are still spewing out record amounts of emissions. So for some reason, we haven't found business models yet that kind of disconnect corporate success from our impact on nature and the need to produce and sell more stuff. So as it turns out, just setting a net zero target or just setting a sustainable ambition is not enough. You have to actually understand how to get there. And that's a bit scary because we don't have the luxury of time. Everybody knows that a lot of scientists have been saying, in 2025, we need to reach the peak of our emissions. And after that, it really has to go down, because otherwise we're crossing some boundaries that will, that are critical tipping points for the ecological systems of this planet. And we don't know what will happen when that happens. So we don't have the luxury to take a long time to think about how we might change, but at the same time, we have to fundamentally change. So we have to just imagine a future that is fundamentally different while trying to do it on the go. And that's no different for our trade, the trade of service design, because or whether you're a service design or in customer experience, I think this is true for both. It's a practice with mental models that are really rooted in the extractive paradigm that got us here in the first place. So we would benefit from a very strong kind of reflection on ourselves and on our practice. For example, we have always prioritized human experience, and not only human experience, but we've kind of focused on the few who actually use our products and our services, and not necessarily on the humans around them or around those humans. So we haven't paid much attention to the impact of our products and services on the many and on our planet. And we prioritize human experience so much that it's literally at the top of our tools. So we literally set up our tools so that the first thing you see is the user or the human. And that is kind of amazing because first it was the product that everybody looked at and it was the feature. So it's not that it's only bad, but for the purpose of kind of thinking about the world, it is a very strong focus that doesn't necessarily help us to stretch our trade. And we also have to recognize that this focus on users and on customers has resulted in a lot of unintended consequences and impact on the world around us. But, however, there is one thing that is really interesting about especially this view, like this service blueprint view, is that we're so good at connecting something that we want to exist, the desired customer experience in our case, to what is needed to deliver that. So the operational and business delivery. And that is something that is currently, if you think about that first slide that I showed, missing in the realm of sustainability, where there's quite a lot of big ambitions, but not always a good sense of how do we actually set up our organization and how do we actually change to reach those ambitions, to deliver on them. So there might be something interesting here in the service blueprint that we can use to help deliver more sustainable futures. So concluding this, we do have to go to a deep introspection, but at the same time, we have to be pragmatic and start doing. So let's not waste time and try to adopt our tools in the meantime so that we at least do something. And I would love to bring you along on our journey of taking a first step at integrating a planet perspective in our service blueprints. And I'm going to take you through the trials and errors that we went through, and hopefully that is a useful learning for you as well. I think our first trial was trying to combine our service blueprint with environmental impact measures. And just to get a bit of a sense of the room, I'm going to hit up a poll. Please let us know how, one sec, to check how familiar you are with these kind of impact measure models. Okay, I see quite a lot of people that know of some of them. Not everyone, though. It's nice. I'll show you the results in a second. I see that almost everyone has filled it out now. Cool. I'll just end the poll now so I can share the results. So most of you actually are aware of these impact measures, and that's nice, but some in this call are not, so I will introduce two important ones. The carbon footprint and the life cycle assessment. And the carbon footprint is one that is well known by a lot of people, but not necessarily everybody knows what it actually does. A carbon footprint looks at the environmental impact of an organization. So the entire organization, so not one particular product or one particular service or one particular department, the entire thing. And it analyzes impact from one perspective, and that is the emissions that this operation emits. So it looks at all greenhouse gas emissions, even though it's called carbon footprint. It also looks at at very different types of greenhouse gases. But it uses kind of this equivalence, they call it. If you have another greenhouse gas, they check how much more or less harmful to the environment is that than carbon, and then they use that as kind of a way to calculate that back to the carbon impact. And how a carbon footprint works is it analyzes the impact of a business through 3 scopes, is what they call it. They basically look at what is in your direct control. That's what they call scope 1. So that's literally all the processes that you own and are directly responsible for. So for example, if you're a manufacturing company, the emissions that come from your production processes are included in that. In the second scope, the carbon footprint looks at the energy used to power up those operations and the greenhouse gases resulting from that. You can imagine that that is within a bit of your control. You could say you could have a different contract, you could find different energy sources, but it's not completely in your control. So it's slightly less controlled, the second scope. And the third scope focuses on all the emissions that the company is indirectly responsible for by purchasing products and services from others. And that ranges from laptops, software, to the company cars or the business travel that employees might do. But it also is about the use of the products that you produce by your users and the emissions from that. So you do have some form of control. You can decide which products and services you buy. You can decide, you can nudge your users to use your products in a certain way, but you don't have full control there. So that's kind of how it works. The carbon footprint looks at the emissions from your company and looks at direct control, indirect control, and more indirect control. And it is all measured in megatons carbon. CO2. The second one, the life cycle assessment, is more zoomed in, and it just focuses on the impact of one product generally. And it looks at the product life cycle really from start to finish. So from extracting and processing raw materials through manufacturing, to distribution, to the use, and eventually to processing the waste or disposal. And this impact measurement tool doesn't only look at the emissions that come from a process, but also at other things. So think, for example, about how much water was used in the process, how much land was used and in which way, what kind of natural materials were taken from the earth. Are there other potential ecosystem damages, for example, acidification of water? It also looks at the potential of damage to human health or to ecosystem health. So the life cycle assessment measurement is more zoomed in, but looks at a lot of different types of impact. So our first trial kind of focused on integrating these two in our blueprint, and that turned out to be super difficult. For example, if we look at the latter, so let's try to make a life cycle assessment and combine that with a service blueprint. Well, in most services, we use many products and many digital products, for example, and they each have their own life cycle. So if you, for example, look at a hotel service, then you would also have to look at the life cycle assessment of one cleaning product, or you would have to look at the life cycle assessment of, I don't know, the materials used in the rooms. You would have to look at the life cycle assessment of the food that goes through the hotel. So there's so many different products that it would be super difficult. It would be kind of a 3D blueprint monster to capture these kind of impact in the blueprint. You might be able to use the blueprint to make an inventory of all those products that you would have to do a life cycle assessment of. But it doesn't necessarily become a useful tool trying to put everything in this one overview. And looking at the carbon footprint, well, like I said, the carbon footprint kind of looks at quite a bigger scale and looks at the impact not of just this one service, but if you're using a factory floor for something, then they use it for all the different services or products that come from that factory floor. So it has a scale that sits at way a higher level than the customer interaction that our blueprints usually focus on, which makes it quite difficult to push everything in this very small scope that basically ranges from first contact to buying or using and then to end of use, whilst, for example, a company that produces certain type of products also has an HR department. How would that end up? How would their impact end up in our blueprint? So we were kind of struggling to find a way to put the bigger impact of an organization into the customer realm, and it felt like a big force fit. So our service blueprint is quite limited because it only shows the interaction between the company and the customer, and it doesn't show anything outside of that realm. So a conclusion of trial one, the service blueprint is not really suited as a reporting tool to display environmental impact. So second try. Let's try again. Maybe we can use it to understand a shift from linear to circular, something that many of our clients were focusing on. And we found out when we started to understand circularity that introducing a circular business model or a circular solution is quite difficult because it doesn't automatically fit into the fabric of our value chain, in how our economy is set up, into the lives of people. And these are all kind of knit together in this fine knit system that is optimized for linearity. So other than introducing a new linear product, you really have to think through what happens on all these different levels if you think about circularity. You have to understand how the value chain would be different. You have to understand how the bigger ecosystem of your industry has to be different. You have to understand how the product has to be different. So that is quite a challenge in moving to circularity. And our service blueprint usually only focuses on these two layers, kind of the services and experience and the operation that is delivering it, and not necessarily on the bigger value chain, nor on the bigger setup in the market or in the bigger industry. So we thought, okay, let's try to go beyond that. And can we make a blueprint that maybe also shows the product or the bigger ecosystem, and how would that work? Could we, for example, if we already have an idea for a certain circular product service combination, see what kind of capabilities would be needed in the operation, in the value chain, in the bigger system or in the product, and use the service blueprint as a way to kind of completely get a grip of how this could be operationalized. And that did actually work a little bit. But as we soon discovered when we were discussing this with some of our clients, not every company focuses on circularity per se. So another poll, how familiar are you with your company's environmental goals? And what is your organization's environmental ambition, if you had to choose one of these? I'm waiting for everyone to fill this out. We're almost there. And I'll share the results in a second. Yeah. Okay, I see some people haven't filled it out yet, but I'll share the results now. So you see, if you look at these results, that for a lot of companies, they're not about circularity, and that makes sense. Because, for example, everything you eat is not circular. Or if you are an insurance company, you're not really concerned with the material business model. You're looking at it in a different way. You do have an environmental impact, but not one that is comparable to a product company. Or think about banks. They also don't necessarily have to focus on circularity. Their impact might be more about what do they finance and what not, and what kind of conditions do they set for loans and whatsoever. So they have a very different way of looking at sustainability. And that's, yeah, that means there's different solution spaces, and sustainability is not only about circularity, and that means that we also wanted to use the blueprint, the Planet Lane, for other types of businesses and use it to see how that might work. So conclusion from trial 2, yes, an adaptive service blueprint might be a useful tool to operationalize circularity, but it isn't useful for all businesses. So we felt we had to continue our journey. And then we thought, okay, third trial, a pragmatic attempt to see what is in our realm of influence. So we saw before, we were kind of focused on the customer lifecycle, whilst the organization is way bigger than that. But can we think about, if an organization has a certain sustainable ambition, how that would translate to the interaction that organization has with its customers? So if you're focusing on net zero, in what moments in your customer experience might that have a big impact? If you're focusing on decreasing water use, how would that influence your customer experience? So let's be pragmatic. Let's take the corporate ambitions that most organizations have for sustainability, and let's see how that would translate to the customer experience. So we're not going to be the solution for the whole organization, but we are kind of using our realm of control to show how we might contribute to these goals. And then we thought, okay, then it's first of all quite important to understand what are the moments of Planet impact in that customer experience. So in that interaction between customer and company, when are the biggest moments that impact is ignited? So for example, if your corporate ambition would be reducing food waste, I took a photo from McDonald's. Imagine McDonald's would want to reduce their food waste. Well, then obviously the moment that people are ordering is quite an impactful moment, because if they order too much, yeah, that's something that's quite difficult to change for you as a company. So you might think about a moment in that interaction that reminds people, hey, most of our customers are already full after just one burger or after one plate, but you can always order more. So that might be a moment of planetary impact. We also saw quite often we don't necessarily know what drives behavior in those kind of moments, or what people need to have a different type of interaction with a company. So we would also want to understand and plot across that customer journey, what are our knowledge gaps? So if, for example, the sustainable ambition is to increase the longevity of the products, do we actually know why some people take better care of their products than others? Do we know what motivates some people to clean their their household machines and others not? And what kind of triggers are needed or barriers are there to prevent people from doing that? So that could be a knowledge gap in understanding how we as designers could contribute to that ambition. And then last but not least, obviously we also want to see kind of the planet opportunities. And that's closely connected to those moments of planet impact, but sometimes the opportunities happen before the impact actually arrives. So if your sustainability ambition would be to help people make more sustainable choices, and you're in the business of household appliances, how can you help your customers understand the long-term benefit of more sustainable kitchen appliances that are usually a bit more expensive from the start? So to conclude, it is quite a simple framework in the end. A planet lane that looks at the moments of planetary impact, the knowledge gaps that we have to address these, and opportunities to bring about change. And that felt like quite a useful framework, and we've started to implement it, and it was actually useful. So that's where we ended after our little journey of understanding the planet in the blueprint.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Just remind anyone who's joined since we started that we're collecting questions in the chat to kind of pull them all together at the end. So I'm going to move straight on and bring Miranda in to kind of build on what Anna's described and kind of show you how it's working in action at IKEA. Can I just check with my live work colleagues that we were able to re-grant Miranda click control for the presentation? We're all good?
Yes, I got it. Yes.
Wonderful. So over to you, Miranda. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Miranda. I work at Inca Digital, and it's always good, like Ben said, our company structure is a bit strange, but we have Inter IKEA. They design, manufacture, and distribute our range, and I work at the part where we sell the range and try to keep it in the loop. So I'm not responsible for creating any physical products, and I don't even have any control over it. And we all know in circularity, that's where a lot of the decisions are made. So just that's so you know where I am. So I'm in digital, and I worked on two services that are running. That's the IKEA buyback and resale service, which is an estimation tool that you can use to estimate the value of a secondhand IKEA item that you have at home. You will then get a QR code, you can bring it to the store, and we will sell it to a new owner. And it actually gets sold quite quickly, is our experience, sometimes, or most actually within 24 hours. So that's a reuse cycle from circularity. And then we have IKEA secondhand. You might know the Circular Hub or Bargain Corner in our store. That's where we sell discounted products or products that are out of range. And that's like a unique collection in each store. So we also took care to make a separate page for each store where they can upload items that people can reserve. So in the reuse part of circularity, we're in a pretty good place, but that's just one loop, right? So I also investigated what we can do to help people repair our products. And since you have to assemble most of our product yourself, repair is actually quite a logical thing to do in our universe. And I'm currently working on how we can better recycle materials. And if you now know about the Inter and Inca part, this is where we pull back the materials that we collect from customers back into our own supply chain. So that's quite exciting. This is a picture that I sometimes use to show the intention action gap. This is where 72% of people say they want to reduce consumption, but very little people actually take action. So very few, 28%. And interestingly, they look at people or at companies like IKEA and governments to help them make the right decision. So we're looked at to help them become more circular. And then I thought, well, if I'm a service designer here working on circular products, how can I create more awareness around the positive and negative impact of our service on the planet? And I work in the circular team, so that's naturally a more planet-focused team. But we have lots of teams working in digital that might not be so aware of it. So it would also be good for them to have something, a tool to help them assess their impact and at least be aware of it to see where the opportunities, pain points, and knowledge gaps are. So I think, like Anna also said, we're very focused on human-centered design. I've been in human-centered design for 20 years, so it is a bit of a switch. So we're very used to looking at what can we do for humans as companies to help them solve problems and make their lives better. And I think now it's also time to zoom out one more level where we look like what is our company's interaction with the planet. And that's where I thought we needed a tool. So I added the planet lane. And the customer is still on top. I was looking at you, and I'm thinking, when is the time when we could put the planet on top, right? That's what we would like. But yeah, you have to ease your way into these things sometimes. But I think the blueprint is a super good tool to insert a swimming lane, which we then call the planet lane. And I just added it. So I'm actually here to tell you to just add it. If there's 100 people in this call, if everybody adds it, we can have an impact as service designers. We don't need to create any new tools. And I just want to explain to you how it works. But I also want to say that by putting it in and after working with LiveWork, it was just accepted in there. It's not to say that I did all that work. I had leadership people that also thought it was a good idea. And of course, it's super hard to say, but yeah, let's take it out. Nobody would gladly take out a planet lane. So we did even add a bit more. We have a people and planet positive IKEA strategy. So we added also the social impact in there. And I'm just really happy that's in the template, because if it's in there as a default, like I said, it's harder to take it out than to have to put it in every time. So I hope this will really inspire other teams to also think about this lane and what they should put in it. And here's what we put in it. So like Anna explained, it's really difficult to do a whole CO2 measurement in here or a life cycle assessment. That would create a lot of data, and that's not even the most interesting thing. Like I said, the gap between what people want to do and what they actually do is quite large. So how can we somehow bridge that gap? So that's how we looked at it. And we took the people and planet positive strategy to see what our company goals actually were when it comes to sustainability and social impact. And then we created a how might we question around that. And the how might we question was, how might we empower people just before, during, and after the customer, Inca, or IKEA interaction to live better everyday lives while reducing their planetary impact, focusing on energy, water, waste, and circular behavior. And for my team, it's more circular behavior, but I guess if you have a bit more options to choose from, then as other teams, you can also think about any ideas around these other ways to be more sustainable. And then we just map them into the journey. And what that looks like, these are just some examples for inspiration. They will be different for your company, but we're selling furniture. So as a research opportunity, we want to understand the effort or reward people are looking for when choosing circular over new, because that's the goal of my team, right? We want to make it effortless and rewarding to choose circular secondhand items over new or to consider repair. So how can we help people to make that decision? And then in the exploring and choosing phase, can we create awareness for circular options at the moment of purchasing new? So, you know, in the IKEA stores, the circular hub is all the way at the end of the route, right? You have to go through all the new things. And then you actually see, oh, the chair that I bought is here secondhand. It's actually a better deal, and I don't mind buying it secondhand. So what if we told you that that item is actually present in your store for a 50% discount in the bargain format. That might make it more convenient for you to choose that option. So these are things we are looking at. And then we have the use phase, which is also the phase where there's a lot of environmental impact. So can we somehow communicate opportunities to prolong product life? So take better care of your item, repair it. We can have spare parts, you can order them for free. So to notify people more of that, make them more aware. So if you take anything away from me from this webinar, I would say, try yourself to zoom out one more level and add that planet lane in just to get the conversation going with people who might not think about it. I invited data people, product people, designers, engineers, but it works with every role, right? If you put that in and you look at all the steps in the journey, what could we do there that can make it better? Or what are we doing there that is not so great and that we need to think about more? So I hope you'll try it out. And I trust that you will. And let me know how it goes. Goes back to Anna or Ben.
Oops, one too many.
Nope.
Now we're all controlling it at the same time. Great, so we can open up to questions. I can have a look. I'm just going to start at the bottom here. So Danielle says, likes how you've involved the planet perspective in the service blueprint. Wonder, this is a much hard, how do you convince your client to consider the planet perspective and ultimately take the newly created plan and ensure that the planet perspective is actually implemented? Could mean a big investment. Anybody got an answer for that around convincing people?
I think it would maybe be interesting to hear from Miranda first, because maybe for this particular thing you didn't have to convince people, but I can imagine that before in other instances you had.
Yeah, I was looking at you because I don't work for clients, right? I only have colleagues I need to convince, and I guess I have direct access to them, so that's why I was looking at you. But yeah,
Go ahead, Miranda. Sorry, I was going to interrupt you.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to influence people in a positive way with this, right? Just to go around with this blueprint. And then I also have a bit more control of what they actually do with it because I'm inside the company. So that's why I think it can be different if you're from outside, then move. And then like, how are you going to check if they're actually working with it and not make it some kind of, greenwashing thing, actually almost like we did this and then that was it, right? So I will hand it to our Ben.
So, well, I was just going to say, I think what Miranda's done and what Anna's advocating for is to see the blueprint as part of a kind of operational and delivery tooling and to connect through to sustainability strategy. So at this level of designing, it's about helping a company do what it's saying it's going to do already. It's that we can't do every job, and if they need convincing, then they don't need a blueprint. They're at a different point in their journey. But for a company like IKEA that's made certain commitments, which are hard to deliver on, then this is one of many ways that will help that move forward faster. And I think if you're in a consulting role, you can have this planet lane and you can start to do smaller kind of proactive things of saying, well, I've read your sustainability plans and here's one fantastic opportunity for you to deliver on them.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that a lot of organizations already have sustainable ambitions stated on their website. So it's better published than some corporate business ambitions quite often. So it's quite easy to look it up and our strategy has been to not even ask for it, to just say, and obviously you have your strategy, your sustainability strategy that is focused on blah. And so we incorporated this in the blueprint. We just present it as if it is a given.
So just checking for the other questions, there's one which I think is a hard one, but with your example, Anna, of the McDonald's, you're potentially running up against business outcomes if people are spending less money on less food. Do we have any thoughts on that situation and how to deal with that? I mean, maybe Miranda, you can know from IKEA about the discussions around selling used furniture over new, and how does that look?
Well, I just want to say, this is, even though the time is running out, we are still pioneering a bit here, right? It's not like we're used to a growing system that grows forever and selling more. And I think there's a lot of companies like IKEA that want to sell, but also want to do the right thing. And I like being in that position, but it can be quite tough sometimes, because you do feel like you're swimming upstream. And that's why I really think it helps if you have some solid tools that you know how to work with, and that you can also create a more common understanding with other people with, to show the impact and also like the positiveness of it, right? Let's just be stubborn optimists, as our founder said, because it's easy to be negative and say, no, we cannot do this, we always need to grow, otherwise we do not have any profit. I think this is just another way of looking at a business, and we need to go in that direction. So anything concrete that can help there, I think is something we should really get onto. And I think as service designers, we're in a super good position to do that.
Yeah, and I think this whole presentation is a manifest for pragmatism in a way, because yes, obviously we would rather challenge that fundamental model of, do we always need to sell more? But as we haven't figured that out yet, let's try to do as much as possible in the meantime. And I guess if McDonald's then would say, would we have a project with them? No, we cannot do that. Then let's look for other opportunities that are possible. And I know that there's this general discussion on, like, does incremental work? Well, it doesn't work enough, but doing nothing is not an option. So let's do incremental then. And I think as service designers, we're always working with an organization. It's kind of our material. So we're used to negotiating the customer experience with operational objectives, and this is in a way very similar.
There's a slightly different question, which plays to what you said, Anna, about the measurement alignment. Is do you find that people are kind of requesting or expecting quantitative elements within here, and actually they're missing the qualitative that is part of achieving the goals that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that's in general quite interesting. We see that across all companies, that the focus is very much on the measuring and the reporting, and hasn't yet completely shifted to actually actioning it. And there seems to be this inertia of, oh, we can only action it if we actually already upfront know what the environmental benefit would be. And the truth is, I think we have to just try to break through that barrier, because we won't know exactly how much environmental impact a change would result in. You can ask companies that are specialized in these impact measurement models that I presented before, to take a look at, okay, if this is the organization currently, and in our future idea, the operation would look something like this, using the blueprint perhaps, then maybe they might be able to make this kind of virtual assessment of what the future organization would emit, or what the life cycle assessments would be for that. But I'm hoping that there's already a lot of things you can do without having to wait for them analyzing it. And that's what we're seeing in quite a lot of company that are getting quite anxious for being called out as greenwashers. So it's quite useful that there's this policy that is more strict, that there's this general public that is calling out companies for greenwashing, because that gives an opportunity to say, hey, this is something that might work. Shall we try it? And
Thanks.
measure the decrease in impact later, so we can tell the world about it.
Okay, thanks, Anna. One more question is around the blueprint, I guess, employed for more transformative business models. I guess, Miranda, in terms of introducing circular business models, that might be one. I think it's from somebody called Julia. Even
Yes.
even degrowth models. So have you used the blueprint to really look at the full business model?
I'm not sure if the blueprint is the best way to go for different business models, but I see it as a task for me as a service designer to think about different services that you could work with, right? So if you could maybe have a rental service or the whole repair journey, you could create different journeys out of that. And I guess, it actually, now that I'm thinking about, the service blueprint is a good way where you say, okay, here we sell. What is another option? Or the end of life, how can we make sure it doesn't go to landfill? Maybe we can add a step where we say, bring it to an IKEA recycling point, or make sure you get rid of it in a better way. And the whole business model thinking is something that's definitely going on. And I think that we have the skills to help businesses transform their volumetric growth models into more sustainable and circular models indeed.
Thank you. There's a question here from Rashid. Rashid, I might have to ask you to come on and clarify, actually. So how do you incorporate the cultural aspect of the implementation of the ideas and interventions that then arise from these additional scopes of influence? That's a question. It's interesting to me, but I'm not fully sure I understand. So Rashid, are you able to unmute and?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I wasn't able to join earlier because this has been a wildly successful call and discussion. I'm hoping that I'm able to access the recording soon. But my question was really around sort of like the implementation of insights that you found from increasing the scope of influence, because I really liked the statement that you had made earlier about like, we just assume that this is like part of the model. So in my research, I'm looking at sort of like, how do we create this new cultural norm? How are we establishing new design norms and new business norms, which I think may also get into the previous question, which I understood to be more about like, how are you able to push for new economic models, which is bigger than the business model? Because business, anyway, I divert a little bit. Have you learned anything interesting about the cultural implementation aspect, if people are buying in or understanding things in new ways? Anything that you might have learned around that element? Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to sort of mention some work that Anna and I worked on for consumer electronics white goods company, where that was really what they were interested in. What does it mean for households to start to think differently about the relationship that they have with these items? We actually introduced the idea that these items are new housemates to try and get them to think differently. How do you, what does it mean to take greater care of these things? What does it mean to feel responsible for them when they break or at the end of their life? So I think it's a really interesting frontier, and I think it's a rich vein for designers, because it's a cultural factor, right? It's a human factor rather than the technical piece. And I feel like the technical piece within sustainability is kind of almost too dominant. We're talking about cultural change. That would be my thoughts. So I like the question.
Yeah, one more reflection on that, and that is what I see, that there's in quite a lot of companies already a big willingness. So I'm not necessarily talking about culture, but about willingness, because In every company, there's parents that are thinking about the world that their children are growing up in. In every company, there's people that are engaged and that read the newspaper. So there's always at least pockets of people that are passionate about doing something. But then a lot of people say things like, yeah, I just don't know how to put it into practice. And that kind of makes sense because we were working with a sports shoe company that was introducing a circular shoe, and they ran into such weird stuff. For example, if from the get-go you know that you want to have the materials back into your production loop, then are the products really the consumers, or are they still yours? So how does the law work around that? And that has an implication for the financial setup of that company. Do they write those shoes off in the material or not? That has an implication for how you do accounting. That has an implication for so many things. So these kind of, even if there's this willingness or this idea of, okay, we want circularity, our cultural setup is translated to the infrastructure of our laws, of the infrastructure of our accounting practices, to the infrastructure of our legal contracts. It is translated to everything. So it's just, yeah, even if there's a huge willingness, it is, yeah, we're just trying to rewrite the way that the world works together. And that's incredibly difficult.
That's a great, Anna, I'm going to stop you on that fantastic statement, rewrite the way the world works together, and just to give us time to wrap up. Sorry, yeah, and just let, if you'd like to let everyone know kind of there's some next steps if you want to explore this with us a little bit. Anna, if you could just talk through these two offers we have.
So we did already do some explorations together with design teams in different companies. Some were just about understanding, okay, design, sustainability, what does that mean? How could that work? Just a very explorative workshop setup, and we would love to do it with more companies or more design teams. And if you're really thinking like, yeah, I want to do this planet lane exercise for the service that I'm working on, and I could use some coaching or help, also reach out, because then let's try and do it together in a workshop format. And yeah, get in touch with Ben if you're closer to the United Kingdom. Get in touch with me if you're closer to the Netherlands or in the Netherlands. And in Brazil, there's Luis that will gladly talk to you. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Wonderful. Thank you all for joining. Those of you who stayed till the end. Apologies for people who couldn't access, but you're not here. So yes, look out for the next time. This was all recorded. We will send it out to everybody. We'd love to hear feedback from anybody, and we'll be soliciting that following up.